I am Dr. Karyn Purvis, and I'm the director of the Institute of Child Development at TCU. And I want to talk to you about an evidence-based intervention that we have cultivated over the last 20 years from research and from working in the field. We call it Trust-Based Relational Intervention. And what you'll find is that it is all about relationships. It is all about understanding optimal development. And it is all about connecting caregivers to the heart of a child who's been harmed. So we began this work many years ago, and we have used this practice with children. As you can see in this footage, you can see a child, a 16-year-old who tried to cut her mother's throat with a butcher knife. You can see a fetal alcohol newborn. You can see children adopted internationally. You'll see a little girl who was found in a rusted out school bus in the Everglades. Her parents were dealing drugs in the front of the school bus. We have used this intervention. It is simply optimal development, what should have happened for the children. And we can bring any child back online, is what we've demonstrated in our research and in our work with families and organizations, if we understand what they missed. So the earliest research that I am aware of about trauma and long-term behavioral outcomes is more than 50 years old, in the research lab of Professor Stephen Suomi. And what he discovered when he took little primate monkeys away from their mothers at birth, and he would raise them in partial deprivation, in full deprivation of nurture. He put them into a cage where there was only a glass between the mother and the infant, the baby primate. They could see, smell, hear, but couldn't touch. And what Professor Suomi found in his research was that there were dramatic changes in the behavior. So as you look at these little primates that have been raised in isolation, partial isolation, in full isolation, in short-term isolation, long-term isolation, or with abusive mechanical mothers. So they would take mechanical mother monkeys and expose the little ones to them. And we see what you and I would call internalizing behaviors or externalizing behaviors. Now, some further research that is astounding actually looked at brain images and portions of the brain. Now we know that brain damage is involved in the way our children think, behave, feel, understand the world. And we have to address the trauma at the root symptom in order to have real behavioral change and real change for the long-term outcomes. So I want to tell you a story out of my own life that I believe becomes a parable of development. So a number of years ago, I moved into a house, and I loved the little neighborhood, loved the little house. And on my front door stoop, when I moved in, there were a mother and daddy barn swallow that were a mating pair, and every spring they gave, they fixed their nest and rebooted their nest, and they laid several sets of eggs and had young. And every year, my little grandsons and I would pull the ladder or the kitchen chair out and respectfully peek from a distance and look at the little birds. Well, there was a trauma in my neighborhood, but I didn't realize that the birds would experience trauma. A man who lived a few doors from my house had been told by his wife as she left for Bible study on a Sunday morning that she was going to file for divorce. Well, it was her second marriage, his first. And the man was completely distraught. His wife left for church, leaving her teenage daughter by her first marriage at the home. The father, distraught and completely irrational, took the child hostage and called the church, said, "Get my wife out of Bible study, and you tell her, unless she loves me and stays with me, I'm going to kill her daughter." I mean, clearly a distraught man, clearly beyond logic and ration. This man was in such despair that there was no clarity of thought for him at all. So my neighborhood became a war zone. The streets were blocked off. The only two entrances in my community were blocked off by fire trucks. You had to show your ID that you lived to get into the neighborhood. Helicopters, police helicopters were fluttering back and forth overhead. There was a personnel carrier with 8 men in army fatigues and giant guns driving up and down my streets. Sharpshooters were in every 2-story window that could get a bead on this house, thinking if the man walked by a window that they would take his life. And the final trauma for my neighborhood that morning was as 6 little black, low, sleek cars drove up into my neighborhood and parked a street behind my home. And 6 wiry-framed 30-ish-year-old men climbed out of their cars, and they went to the back of their cars and opened their trunks, and they began to put on black elastic head masks, black elastic garb, and then they pulled out giant belts and strapped giant belts, and we watched them as they stuffed knives and guns into their belt. And then they scampered out around to try to find any window, any door that they could possibly get into that house. Well, the police negotiations went on all day long, and it was late at night, almost midnight, when this man became rational enough to realize that there was no way he and his wife were going to be able to be married, to know now that he would certainly be in prison for his acts of violence that day. He took kerosene from the garage and he poured it throughout the house, took the teenage girl and shoved her out the front door and bolted the door. He torched the house and he put a bullet in his own head. And that night, the house 3 doors from my house burned down. So by morning, my neighborhood was in this horrific shock. Over the coming months, as soon as this house was rebuilt, virtually every house where a sharpshooter had been, where a fire truck had parked, where the SWAT team had dressed to go in after this man, every house where the police presence had been felt, the Army presence had been felt, those houses went on the market. People couldn't wait to get out of my neighborhood. But what I didn't know was that the little birds would be traumatized as well. So the following morning, after the fire, I went out to pick up the Sunday paper, and I discovered that this mother and father barn swallow had taken their little tiny babes, the little eggs, almost 24 hours, almost ready to hatch, and had picked them out of the nest and had walked 10 feet or more to the street and had dropped those little eggs, and there were dead babies in the cracked eggs on my driveway. And I didn't even know birds could be traumatized, but I watched this mother and father barn swallow as they began to rebuild the nest that had perfectly housed their young for years. I left on an international trip, and when I returned, the nest had grown to this size. The nest that had been 4 inches around and 4 inches tall was 36 inches wide and 48 inches long, with a whole pile of pieces of grass that had fallen from the nest, and then this huge nest. Now, if you can look closely at this photograph, you'll see string, pieces of wire, pieces of tape, masking tape, duct tape. My favorite, you will see balls of cat fur, which I've never known a healthy bird to make a baby's nest with cat fur. My birds were clearly traumatized, but what happened was now the nest that had been compact and safe was unsafe. There were holes everywhere now. So I came home from school, from the university, and there would be a dead baby or 2 dead babies, or they would lay more eggs. There would be cracked eggs. And I cleaned up several sets of dead young. I tried to put a laundry basket with soft blankets to catch them to break the fall, but I kept burying dead baby birds. So I'm gonna test your confidence in me. I want you to know I did earn my PhD because I'm about to confess to you that I decided the only thing a woman of science could do in a situation like this was talk to the birds. So I decided to have a come to Jesus meeting with my birds. Now, I'm certain they understood every word that I said. I went and stood in front of the nest and I said, I am sorry, but I'm going to tell you that I cannot clean up any more dead babies. I am heartbroken every time I clean up your dead young. And I am going to do something, and I'm going to tell you that I'm sorry, but I'm going to wash away your nest. And I hope that as you rebuild your nest, you'll remember what it means to be a barn swallow. And I'm certain they understood me, because they dutifully went off the nest and started chattering at me, doing figure eights in the yard, just chattering and chattering at me. And as they did that, I took the garden hose and I turned it on, and I got a giant black trash bag, and I swept off that giant nest. And I filled a huge trash bag with what was in the nest and on the ground under it. And then I took the garden hose and I washed the residue from the top. And then I waited, and I waited. And I'm glad to tell you that within only a few weeks, my barn swallows had a 4-inch nest and little tufted, freshly cracked chicks who had just come out of their eggs. Now, the parable of development that sounds like gibberish, but the scientific parable is this: if I have a function and I lose it, I regain it the same way I got it. So if you look at the scientific language that goes with that, recovery of function recapitulates development of function. So this mother is very discreetly nursing her newborn child at breast with herself modestly covered. Everything that should have happened for the children that we serve that didn't happen is how we bring them back online. See, we have to go back to the beginning, and we have to meet those very, very basic needs. And that is how we have had dramatic success with children literally around the world, is understanding early development, what they should have gotten, and how to give that to them now. Now, some of you may be familiar with the BBC News story that broke in 2007. A mother who had her child in the hospital heard muffled cries down the hallway of infants. She was very distressed because she was in the pediatric wing. And down the hallway, she went and opened the door and peeked in. And what she saw was absolutely stunning to her. She went back and got her cell phone. The staff at the hospital who were caring for children abandoned at birth. These were children who would go to orphanages as they became older. The staff was tired of the babies crying, and they took duct tape and put it over their mouths and plaster of Paris over the duct tape to make the baby stop crying. Now, see, we've known from the 1950s in a book by 2 Yale pediatricians that if we don't meet the needs of a child in the first 30 to 60 days of life, they stop crying. So maybe you, like I, have been to orphanages internationally, and you may find a room of 30 infants, 40 or more infants, and there's no child crying. They lay in soiled diapers. They don't cry. They know no one comes. They lay hungry. They know no one comes. They lay cold. They lay with sores on their little bodies. They lay with bugs climbing on the sores, and they don't cry because they know no one will come. They have lost their voice. Any child who comes to us from a hard place has lost their voice. And any child that comes to us, we have to understand how to restore that voice. We have to understand how to help them go back to the beginning and get those things that they lost. Now, we talk about the attachment cycle, and you're probably familiar with this. It's been around for probably 45 years. So a baby cries, somebody comes, a baby cries, somebody comes, a baby cries, somebody comes, and I learned to trust. I learned everything that there is to know about being precious and human and valuable and adored. I cry, you come. I cry, you come. I cry, you come. Now, as I move into looking at the attachment relationship in that earliest time of life, probably 100,000 times in the early months of life, that baby cries and somebody who's loving comes, right? So everything that we know about being human in all its beauty comes out of the attachment cycle. I know that if I cry, you care about me. And what comes is the capacity to attach, the capacity to trust, the capacity to know that I am precious and that I have value because you come and you meet my needs. And what we call self-efficacy. I know that my words matter. So see, when we work with a 17-year-old with a butcher knife, I am asking that child to use their words, not their behavior. And I have to prove to them, just like a parent should have been on duty for them early, I have to prove I am safe adult, on duty, right now, listening to you. So give me words, because I'm listening. If I look at a second part of the cycle, not something different, but I look at a second part would be called the sympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic nervous system, which come in balance, it's called the HPA axis, or just the stress system, okay? So if I cry, my sympathetic nervous system kicks in, my heart rate increases, my blood pressure increases, I'm crying, my face is red. But then you come, my parasympathetic system kicks in. I know I'm safe. I was hungry, but now I'm warm and fed and snuggled and cared for. And I know that I matter, and I know that I'm safe. And we actually cultivate in the first few months of life the ability to download from caregiver to child the ability to regulate. In the beginning, I am, you are, external modem for any newborn. They can't go get a snack. They can't go get a sweater. I'm external modem. I regulate. They're hungry, I regulate their blood sugar. They're cold, I regulate body temperature. They're lonely, I regulate emotions. I am external modem. And in all child development, first, the external modem helps me learn to regulate. And then I can co-regulate, and then I can self-regulate. If a child comes to us at 12 and they didn't have capacity, they didn't have the experiences of I cry and you come, the system of the brain for regulatory capacity is shut down. It's in cold storage. So if they come to us at 8, if they come to us at 12, we're teaching them how to regulate. We're teaching them how to deal with their emotions. And then if I looked at one more part of that cycle, it would be the brain chemistry that predicts mental health or mental illness. And so on one side, when I'm cold and hungry and lonely, on this side, when I am distressed, there's something that floods my body called excitatory neurotransmitters. And those are the ones that make me have energy to run, that give me energy to fight, that gives me the capacity to protect myself from danger. So excitatory neurotransmitters flood my body and my brain. But when you come, serotonin, that is the master regulator for mental health, GABA, that is calming, this is released in my body because of your care. So excitatory is balanced by inhibitory. Excitatory, inhibitory, excitatory, inhibitory. And over time, what we see happen is the capacity and the set point for the thermostat, if you will, of the brain chemistry is set on the ability for balance, right? Now, the tragedy for the children that we are serving, and the tragedy of children who come from hard places, is if they didn't have I cry, you come, none of these things happen. And so we will have a child who is on a crash course for mental illness. So I'm distressed, but there's no help. I'm dysregulated, but there's no modulation. I'm flooded with fear and fight, flight, or freeze chemicals, and there's no balance. So we see a trajectory in children coming from hard places. And that trajectory is that at 2 to 3, we see behavioral dysregulation. Parts of the brain are turned off, parts of the brain are turned on. At 4 to 6, we see ADD, HD symptoms. Because there's too much excitatory neurotransmission, nothing to calm it, okay? At 8 to 10, we see depression, anxiety, and for some children, violence, which is an artifact for many children of depression, because low serotonin, which is about anxiety and depression, is also about aggression. And then at 12 or 12 plus, we see bipolar as the diagnosis du jour, with many of these children earning borderline personality as young adolescents. Okay? So the trajectory is a sobering trajectory. The capacity for a child to regulate and to do well has been stolen from them by the lack of the early care. So Let me talk to you about two sets of brain development information, okay? What we know is that there are 6 major risk factors, and the prenatal period is the most profound. The greatest brain development and capacity for damage happens in utero. So prenatally, during the prenatal period, is the most vulnerable. So prenatal development is the most vulnerable time for the brain. Okay? This means that if you bring a child into your care at birth, you've got to understand their brain has already been altered, and you have to do the things. You don't assume they haven't been abused postnatally, but you understand they've been harmed prenatally. Okay? The second major growth period is the first year of life, when the brain is making new synapses at a breathtaking pace. Now, at the age of 5 is not a brain growth stage, but we ask kids to sit still in school and learn. And so what we see at 5 is the first major ka-thump. At 8 is a major brain growth development, 12 and 16. So if there is something off in the foundation of brain development, we may see a little of it at 2, but at 5. And then the 3 major times that our children have new drugs, new diagnoses, and increasing levels of behavior are 8, 12, and 16. So whatever age child comes to us, this says we give them what we know is optimal development. We don't wait for these things to emerge. There are major risk factors. The prenatal period is the most high risk. Birth trauma, hypoxic episode, early hospitalization, and then abuse, neglect, and trauma. So we very often will have children whose families are mystified because they didn't realize that the traumatic birth impacted brain development. I was working in another town doing a presentation, and a woman came to me and she said, "You were here to talk about adoption, and I came because we have a child from Vietnam." But she said, "The stunning thing for me is you talked about my biological child. She's been psychotic since she was 4. She's on drugs since she was a tiny thing. She has violent rages at 8. We have to lock her in her room. We've had to strip her room because she hurts herself and she hurts others when she goes into these violent rages." And I said to that mom, "Tell me about the prenatal period." And she said, "Well, it was the worst time of my life. My baby sister was in an auto accident. They told her she was going to die. And we stayed at the hospital on death watch. And then they told us she was going to live, and we went home and showered. And then they called us back to the hospital. And she said we went back and forth for weeks while that baby's brain was developing, right? So the most important risk factor, prenatal. The second most important risk factor is when we have birth, the capacity for a hypoxic episode or another birth trauma, early hospitalization. So those 3 are neglected when we look at what children need. Abuse, neglect, and trauma, the child needs the same thing. So if I look at every child in my care and I know that they should have learned from me how to trust, they should have learned from me how to regulate, they should have learned from me how to modulate their emotions and regulate their brain chemistry by my modeling and my example, then I'm going to take that model to any child that I serve of any age, actually in any environment. Now, trust-based relational intervention has 3 sets of principles. Now, I will say very briefly, if you think about a child from hard places, you can see that everything was changed, right? We know the brain was changed by their trauma pre or postnatal. We know that their beliefs were changed. Somebody should have come. Nobody cares about me. I'm not valuable. We know that even their biology is more fragile. Everything changed. So holistic harm has got to have holistic intervention. And that's what TBRI is about. We have 3 sets of principles. We do connecting principles, which is the foundation of how do I look into your eyes? How do I give you a voice? How do I meet your need? We have empowering principles for the body that got changed. How do I meet the unique changes that have occurred in your body? A child whose brain has been dramatically altered by pre and or postnatal trauma. And then we have a set of correcting principles. Now, you will think about correcting principles and you will know that that's an important thing to do with a traumatized child. But we have great success correcting behavior because it is all about connecting and empowering. So under each set of principles, we have 2 sets of strategies. So for connecting principles, first there's my job, mindfulness. What does my face look like? What does my voice sound like? I've had many teenage girls and staff or parents stand in front of the bathroom mirror to finish an argument. And the staff may get a glance at their own face that they didn't know what they were telling that child nonverbally, right? We've had many fathers leave a tape player in their pocket at breakfast and play after the children left for work and see if he sounds like a drill sergeant, right? So becoming mindful, what am I doing in this relationship? How am I triggering this behavior? Second, attunement, how do I look into this child's eyes? We try to teach caregivers to look at pupil dilation. Is there too much excitatory neurotransmission? Are they afraid? Our children have learned to mask fear, but if you know the physiology, you can see it. So is the jaw tightened? Is the breathing shallow? If you put your hand sometimes on the heart of a young child over the chest or in the shoulder and feel the pulse, you'll feel bam, 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 where the heart rate tells the tale that they're afraid. How do I become attuned? How do I give you a voice? How do I let you know you're safe here with me? So 2 sets of principles for connecting, 2 sets of principles for empowering. And the first one is the environment. We call it ecological strategies. If I'm a teacher, my classroom shouldn't be too chaotic. I don't want too much stuff on the walls, not sound that is too loud. If I'm the pastor in the church, do we have bands that are drumming our kids out of the worship service on Sunday morning? I see kids who are well behaved all week having meltdowns on Sundays because pastors weren't aware. If I'm a parent, is my home too chaotic? Is the child's room too chaotic? How does the environment respect their trauma? And so the other part is their physiology. I'm going to teach my child, you know, the last time you got hungry, you got really grouchy. So let's stop and practice listening to our body and seeing if you can listen, just stop and breathe and listen to your body. Tell me if you're hungry. And you know what, if you are, let's go get a snack. So I'm teaching that child what they should have learned from my external modem. But I am becoming their mentor in how to do these things. And then we have 2 sets of correcting principles. And the first is the same way we teach our own babes. When I'm doing this little piggy went to market, I'm teaching a child to regulate. When I'm doing peekaboo and the child is counting 3 seconds in their little being, and they know that at 3 seconds the peekaboo is going to happen, right? I'm teaching that child proactively through play. And then we also have a very effective set of strategies that we call responsive strategies. And those strategies are about, what do I do when the child has a butcher knife? What do I do when they put the cat in the microwave? So we have calls from people all over the world wanting our responsive strategies. Can you see it's 1/6 of what we do, and it's the least important 1/6? Okay? We have tremendous success because we're connecting, we're becoming mindful, we're becoming attuned, because we're aware of the environment while we teach the child to be aware of their own physiological needs. And because we're teaching through play in the same way a good parent teaches their little teeny child or their toddler. By the way, you may have seen, as I did some years ago, that the cardboard box made the 10 best gifts of all time list. So how many of us have played regulatory games with cardboard boxes, right, with our own biological children? In thinking about connecting principles, we're going to think about things like attunement, safe touch. We're going to think about things like smiling eyes, undivided attention. We're going to think about warmth of our voice, warmth of our tone. Now, caregivers will say, but I have 4 children in my home, or I have 8 children in my unit, or I have 20 children in my care in the classroom. So how do I find 30 seconds to say to a child who's clamoring with all the other children, I stop, I look into their eyes, I give them undivided attention for 30 seconds. And I say, darling, I really want to talk to you about that, but I'm finishing dinner, or I'm finishing our class assignment. Could we talk about that after dinner or at the recess? So I've given a child less than 30 seconds of attention, but I've given undivided time. I've given undivided eye contact. I've given them the message, I am here for you. I can't do it right now, but here's our plan. We will do it in just a little while. So connection is going to be the most important thing that we do. If we don't connect, we do nothing that matters. If the child doesn't know that we're their coach, that we're their advocate, that we're their ally, there's nothing else they'll believe us to learn from us. So, for example, if you watch this daddy and this darling little daughter of his, and you see that they're attuned, they're synchronous, just watch their play. They're beautiful to watch.
Is that a yummy pillow? It is. Little. Who's yours? Little. Let me see yours. Let me feel yours. No teeth yet. No teeth yet. Little. Little. Ooh. Ooh. Bow, 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 bow. Bow, 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 bow.
So here's clearly a child learning to regulate from her dad, learning she's precious from her dad, learning to trust from her dad, right? This looks different with a 7-year-old, but it's the same stuff. It's just the stuff of humanity. It looks different with a 17-year-old, but it's the same stuff. It's just the stuff of humanity. My dad died about 3 or 4 years ago. At the age of 90, he needed the same. He needed to know I have a voice. He needed to know my life has meaning. He needed to know there are safe others who will care for me. He needed to know that somebody will listen when I call. It is simply the stuff of humanity. We give it in an age-appropriate package, but we must give it, or we give nothing. A second set of principles would be empowering. We know, for example, children coming from hard places don't usually have a loving mother or a loving daddy following them around with a sippy cup, right? Honey, you want to drink a juice, you want a little water. They come to us chronically dehydrated, which is actually more serious than it sounds. Not only have researchers published thousands of studies showing cognitive and behavioral failure when you're dehydrated, but we also know that a chemical that's one of the excitatories that's already too high for our children, called glutamate, fires more often in the brain if you're dehydrated. Well, the problem with that is that too much glutamate or a glutamate spike is associated with seizures, violence, and aggression. So simply hydrating, you fed your biological child every 2 hours, we're going to give something to drink on a regular basis, just like you would have developmentally. We're going to address food every 2 hours. Now, chronic stress or exposure to alcohol in utero, and the vast proportion of children who are available to foster or adopt have been exposed to substance. The national statistic in this country is 80%. Have been exposed to substance. That means dramatic changes in the insulin receptor sites. Or if the trauma is postnatal, where the body keeps giving energy, blood sugar to run, fight, flight, or freeze, and the insulin receptors get changed. If the child from a hard place goes more than 2 hours without a snack, or if they get a snack that spikes blood sugar, we get behavioral and emotional failure. So we're simply going to feed them every 2 hours, exactly like we did our own child. Exactly like a loving caregiver does with a tiny one, okay? And we're going to do a physical activity every 2 hours. Now, part of Professor Suomi's research many years ago, and part of the brain imaging where you saw the synaptic connections, that was in the cerebellum. That is in the part of the brain that processes the senses, and we now believe processes emotions, okay? What that means is the first research that we have on children from trauma, or primates from trauma, is that they're going to be more susceptible to not being able to process the senses. Well, that's a problem because everything you take in from the world goes through the senses for processing. And so we're going to have a physical activity for about 15 or 20 minutes every 2 hours. which is exactly what you did with the newborn. You held them every 2 hours to feed for 20 minutes. And they got the sensory bath of your touch, your warmth, hearing your voice, and their brain developed around those things. So we're going to create for a child, 6 or a 16-year-old, we're going to create the same environment to empower these unique things in their body. We're going to do something that we would call a sensory diet. So we would make the classroom environment more sensory rich, but not overstimulating. We might make the home environment more sensory rich, but again, not overstimulating. So a parent with a 4-year-old in the home might buy a sit and spin, which offers a lot of sensory input, and the child might want to play on that for 15 minutes while mom's fixing breakfast. So we think about the sensory needs. We buy these giant buckets of rice and we bury Fisher-Price animals in them so the children can play in the buckets of rice. We don't recommend it if there's a cat in the house, okay? You will find treasures you did not plant. We also buy the large wading pool during the summer in the five and dime store, and we fill it with 100 pounds of kidney beans. And we only have 3 rules for the kidney beans. The kidney beans stay in the pool, the kidney beans stay in the pool, and the kidney beans stay in the pool. That replaces, they don't go in your nose, they don't go in your ear, and that replaces about a dozen rules, right? So we're going to think about making the environment. Now, I don't have time in an overview of TBRI to do any elaboration on sensory processing, but let me tell you that the vast majority of our children coming from hard places, because of the research that we started doing 55 or more years ago in this country, shows us that the regions for processing, the cerebellum, and now we know other regions for processing, are dramatically altered. Now, I will tell you that there is one exception to the sensory processing. Most senses go through a channel relay in the brain and then to the higher cortical function, except for smell. Smell goes directly to the fight, flight, or freeze part of the brain called the amygdala. So if you've got a little guy having meltdowns in the cafeteria at lunch, let's make sure that it's not because a child 3 tables over opened a tuna fish sandwich and the smell went to that child. So we will talk in our work about how to teach children to calm. Smells are alerting and they drive behavior, and smells can be also very calming. So we're going to think about meeting sensory needs. Now I want to show you a clip. In this particular camp, we had 3 5-year-olds kicked out of public school for a whole year because of violence. And I want to show you one of the little guys. Now, when we talk about teaching proactively, we talk about taking, for example, time with the class, and we say with the children, maybe in a little group, or an individual child, or 2 children in a home, or children in a unit, we make a little engine plate. How does your engine run? Well, my engine's red, it's way too high, blue, way too low, or just right, green. And before we bring out something to teach a child about being gentle and kind, for example, we will say, let's stop and breathe, see how your engine is running. Is it too high, too low? Just right. And then we'll teach a child to be mindful. And then, okay, if it's too high, what can we do to calm? And then we'll practice something to calm. So that little child who is there practicing calming, and then we're going to say, now we're going to bring out a little hamster before we put him in your hands, because you're a giant, to jack the hamster. Before we put him in your hands, is your engine on green? Are you breathing because you don't want to use a loud voice? You don't want to move fast? You don't want to scare this little guy, right? Now, we've done all of that to prepare the children for this 3-ounce hamster. And then we're going to practice gentle and kind, which is a proactive way. I'm not waiting for a child to hit another child and say, be gentle, be kind, right? But I'm going to practice the skill like I would have with a newborn. I'm teaching proactively with a toddler, okay? This is how we pet our kitty. This is how we hold our brother. I'm teaching proactively. So in this clip, what I want you to see is this beautiful little guy who's been kicked out of public school for a year, who has huge sensory issues. And one of our staff is going to put this 3-ounce hamster in this little guy's hands. I want you to look at his lips and hear him say, ow, ow, ow. And you'll see that the staff who is working with him has to take the hamster from his hand because he is so sensory aware that this hamster hurts him. Can you see how much misbehavior is driven by sensory stuff? So it's our job as we mentor the children to teach them, so if it's too loud in here, could you use your words and tell me? Now, a lot of caregivers are confused about this because if you have the remote to the television, it's too loud for some children, okay? But if they have the remote, they crank it up, okay? But what I can tell you about the fear system is if you have control, your fear system doesn't turn on. Now, truthfully, think about it, ladies. Would you rather be driving 90 miles an hour with your husband as your passenger? Or would you rather be in the car with him driving 90 miles an hour with you as the passenger? See, I mean, if I have control, I have at least a perception that I could do something about what's happening, right? And that's the same with our children. If they really want to go to the basketball game, they can withstand the noise because they really, really want to do this cool thing. But on a regular basis, they can't withstand, okay? So don't be fooled by what appears to be conflicting behaviors in a child. Now, we have correcting principles. We use scripts. We have a response we call the ideal response. It's based on neuroscience. We have life value terms, practices. We have tremendous success, and we have documented with children in homes, schools, orphanages, nurseries, daycares, many, many homes, and really many residential facilities. And the two features that we see every time we teach individuals about trust-based relational intervention, which is just teaching about relationships, we see a dramatic reduction in restraints immediately. And we see more contentment in staff because, you know what, before I was making a sacrifice, or in the parent, before I was opening a vein, I felt like I was opening a vein to meet the needs of this child, but I wasn't making a difference. But now I can see joy in this child. Now I can see healing in this child, and those are the two things that we see over and over again. Now, there's a great amount of research and elaboration on how to do what we call correcting principles. But it's important to know that correcting has no power unless I have done everything that comes before. And think about the developmental trajectory. I'm first attached. I get to say yes to my newborn for almost 2 years. They cry, I say, yes, I'll meet your need. They cry, I say, yes, I'll meet your need. And then one day that little pumpkin takes a screwdriver towards the electric socket and you shriek your first no. Right? Now, we don't get a chance to say yeses with a 17-year-old who's been in care for 16 years. We don't get 2 years. If we get 2 days, it's miraculous, right? Because they've learned to live by their wit. So we're going to have to be proactive. I always introduce myself to children in hard places with a bucket of double bubble. Hi, I'm Miss Karyn. Did you know that any time you ask me for bubble gum, because I'm the queen of bubble gum, if you ask me with good words and good eyes, if you can have a piece of gum, I'm going to give you a piece of gum. And so I'll say, and of course here's the child looking at my double bubble bucket, and they'll say, can I have a piece of gum? I'll say, sure, that was great asking. It's hard for them. At first they'll be going, can I have a piece? Let me see your eyes. Can I have a piece? You know, because they can't get their eyes off the gum, right? But I'm learning, I'm showing them, I'm demonstrating, I'm their coach. And I'm gonna say, baby, let me see your eyes. And so they ask me for a piece with pretty good words, right? And then I might say, that was great asking. Which piece do you want? They choose it, they pop it in their mouth. I said, you wanna ask me for 2? Ooh, yeah, right? So can I have 2 pieces? Oh yeah, that's good asking, right? And they pop 2 in their mouth, and then I know what you're thinking, that's too much gum, you stop it, okay? Because I'm teaching this child they've got a voice, number 1. I'm meeting a need and proving that their words matter, number 2. And number 3, there's actually a scientific publication in Science and other scientific journals that proves that we elevate IQ and academic performance when we're getting deep muscle input. It's part of the sensory issue, right? But if I have 10 minutes with a violent child and 27 yeses for double bubble, I've got a lot of trust in before I have to say, baby, I'm sorry, you can't say kill. We don't say kill. Try it again. Because I'm listening, but now I'm listening means something. It's not rhetoric. we teach through play. Here's again this beautiful little boy with his camp buddy, and we teach using words, and we teach doing the wrong thing first and then doing it right. And so he's going to ask this little fella to use his words and ask for a compromise, but he's going to ask him to do something, and first the little guy is going to do no respect. So we're practicing respect, no respect and respect, with using no words and then using words.
Zane, it's time to stop blowing bubbles and come inside.
No.
Okay, one more time. Compromise. Zane, it's time to stop blowing your bubbles and come inside.
Can I have a compromise?
Ooh, all right, what do you have in mind?
Can I have a compromise to blow one more bubble?
Ooh, do you promise to come inside right after you blow that bubble?
Yes.
All right then, blow on.
Good compromise then. Now, what we know from research is that it takes 400 repetitions of an act or a learning skill 400 times to get one new synapse. Or, would you like to know an option? There's an option. Or 12 repetitions with joy and laughter, and you get a synapse because there's a release of the chemical dopamine, okay? I'm actually changing the architecture of the brain when I play, the same way I would have with my little one in my arms. Okay? So we're teaching through play, we're teaching children that we're listening to their words, but they need good words. So in one facility that we served, there was this dramatic reduction in physical violence in the first 6 weeks that they did trust-based relational intervention. But there was also a dramatic upheaval of mouthiness. So first you go use your words, and then you're going use your good words, right? So I'm listening, but I need good words. So if I look at examples of empowering, if I look at examples of the ecology, that will be things like transitions. I'm going to tell you how we're going to change the environment so you're not scared or upset. I'm going to talk about things like rituals, like every night we're going to read a story, and every night we're going to whatever it is, so that children have something that they can depend on, that they can trust, that they know is coming. I'm creating an ecology of safety that meets their needs. Physiology, you know what, we're going to have snacks every 2 hours, and I'm going to give you a water bottle you can take to school, and you can have water anytime because I already cleared it with your teacher. So I'm teaching a child about their physiology, for example. If I look at examples of connecting, mindfulness, I am going to be aware as the adult that it's my job to be calm and to know what my face looks like, what my voice sounds like, that I am creating an atmosphere of fear or of healing by my presence. I'm going to look at things like engagement. So, am I looking into this child's eyes? Does this child know they're safe with me? Are his effexor muscles tightened? Are his hands stiff? Or is he relaxed? I'm going to be attuned to what he's feeling, what he's thinking, what he needs. And then if I look at the correcting principles, first proactive, am I playing? Am I doing playful times? Am I taking a squirt gun to the swimming pool with me and saying, you can shoot me anytime you ask permission, and I only ask you not to shoot my face, right? So I'm going to be teaching through play. And then when it's time, I'm going to be responsive, and I'm going to be able to do behavioral intervention in a way that empowers and gives that child a voice. And I will tell you that when you look at behavioral intervention at this level, when you look at behavioral intervention, you're going to find in everything that we do, it's going to be trust-based, it's going to be relational, okay? It's going to be proactive, but you're going to find that we're giving the child the voice they lost. See, the tragedy of a child from hard places is that they lose the inheritance of knowing who they are. They lose the inheritance of capacity to trust. They lose the inheritance of believing that their words make a difference in their care. So if a parent says to me, my 17-year-old spins on his heels and leaves the kitchen every time we're talking, I'm saying, okay, we're going to be proactive about understanding why. We're going to address the behavior. But you're going to have to be mindful. Does he know his words matter? Does he know you are listening? How does he know that? Because he's not just going to get it, okay? So I will address behavior. I will be responsive, buddy. That's not okay just to walk out. Okay. But I'm going to also do it in a way that gives him back his lost voice. If you look at the 4 levels of response that we've developed over the years for working with vulnerable children, at every level, I'm empowering the child to use their words and tell me what they need. So at level 1, there's no real danger, no real threat. We call it playful engagement, level 1. Child might say, give me that. When I might say, you asking or telling? It's just playful, right? Well, I'm asking. Okay, then try it again with good words, right? I'm giving the child his voice, and I'm showing him how to use it. Okay. At level 2, a child might be more persistent and their misbehavior, and so we move into what we would call structured engagement. And at structured engagement, that child might say, that's stupid, I'm not doing that, and you can't make me do it. There's no danger still, but there's resistance. And so I'm going to say to that child something like, you know what, buddy, you've got 2 choices. Or I'm going to say, if you're asking for a compromise, you need to try it with good words. See, and again, I'm teaching them how to use their words to get their needs met. The 14-year-old who says, I'm not wearing a jacket to school, you're stupid, and that's stupid, and jackets are stupid, and I don't need a jacket. The thing I'm going to say, that's a level 2, nobody's in danger, right? But I'm going to say, if you're asking for a compromise, you need to try it again. See, truthfully, will he die of the cold if I let him go without a jacket? No. So I can actually get a big win because maybe his jacket isn't cool, or maybe he wants to look like a big tough guy. There's a certain stud muffin effect, you know, for going without a jacket, right? But when I say to the child, if you're asking for a compromise, then you're going to have to try it again, he knows I'm listening, right? At level 3, when the wheels may be coming off, I may say to a child, I want you to sit here and think about what you need. And there's a dozen ways that we would do it at level 3. The goal is to get them in a position to be still, to be calm, to know what they need, to use their words and tell me. And even after a violent episode at level 4, what we would call protective engagement, when I have had a child who has threatened to kill me and drink my blood, when I look into the eyes of the child, when they're calm again, the first thing I'm going to say is, baby, can you use your words and tell me what you need? Because my assumption is, if a child has been violent on my watch, it is because they don't know how to get their needs met appropriately. See, the child that is loved has this powerful protection. I cry, daddy's on duty. I cry, mama's on duty. This child cries who has no parent or no safe parent. And after 30 to 60 days, they say, no adults on duty, I'm on my own. And they will use aggression, violence, manipulation, triangulation, and control. We're going to be effective because we're going to take that away and say, this is not okay, but give me words because I'm listening. And if it's in my power, I will move heaven and earth to meet your need, but I need words. So when I look at any kind of problem behavior, if I'm thinking about correcting principles as we have learned to do them through relationships, I am going to ask myself, what is about the body that could contribute to this behavior? What is it about the spirit, the connection, that could contribute to this behavior? What is it about the unique needs of this child's belief system and the behaviors that they've learned to survive? So, for example, and we might think about things like food issues or sleep issues or behavior issues. Okay? So if I take, for example, let's say food issues. So body, I'm going to think about the body. A child who has very low neurotransmitter serotonin is never satiated. They never feel full, because serotonin makes you feel full. So do I need to work with that child and with a nutritionist to find out what the levels of these chemicals are? A child who has parasites taking all the nutrients, maybe they've come from a filthy environment, that child will never feel full. So maybe they're gorging or hoarding because they never feel full. Children who have had chronic deprivation and who have very low serotonin will very often crave sweets and carbs. So is there something else biological? So I always have to be aware of the biology. Okay? If I were to think about food issues in terms of the spirit, in terms of the connecting, my job as a safe adult is to show my kid I'm on duty. Mama bear's on duty, daddy bear's on duty, right? These children do not come with the belief they have a voice and an adult who's safe, who will respond. And so I might say to that child, you know what, in terms of connecting, how about you and I go, and how about you help me choose 4 fruits at the grocery store, and maybe you help me choose 3 snacks that could go in a bowl in your room, right? So I'm going to make sure that child knows they've got a voice with me, okay? And then when I look at correcting, I'm going to say to the child who's hoarding food or stealing in the night, baby, it's not okay to take food, but you don't have to steal food. You tell me what you need. And the children, if they've ever been hungry, the part of the brain that is about trauma, the amygdala, remembers hungry. And if the child was hungry for 1 year, 12 years ago, they will always have food issues. You can't cognitively talk them out of food issues. So let me ask y'all this. How many of y'all have ever had food poisoning? Anybody ever had food poisoning? Okay. How many of you ate the same food the next day? Have you still eaten the same food? Okay. See, I tossed my cookies at 8 coming from the state fair after a candied apple. So I tossed my cookies at 8 coming from the state fair. With a candied apple, I decorated the side of my father's car. It was not a pretty sight, right? I had my next candied apple when my granddaughters insisted that they were the best thing alive, and we made them in my late 40s. Okay? See, the amygdala is the part of your brain that said if you eat that again, you might die. I can't cognitive you out of your danger. I can't cognitive you out of you are hungry. But I can give you a belief that I'm on duty and that on my watch, you're never going to be hungry again. And so I would say to that child, how about we make you a fanny pack? We put some raisins, we put some little packaged nuts, we might put granola bars. If the child goes to school out of your care, you might ask if the teacher will allow the child to give you a signal when they believe they're hungry. Let them go down to the counselor's office, take a bag of nourishing snacks, have a safe person the child can go to. But in all cases, I'm changing the belief system that no one will care for me, that I'm in danger, that I'm hungry. And in the same way that you and I might have a reduction in fear when we have a sense of control, when we give a child a sense of control, and we say, you know what, every time you're hungry, you just go to the teacher, say, I need to get a snack. She's going to give you a hall pass. She'll go down the hall. If I know as that child that I have a plan, I don't need to go to the hall. I don't need to go to the teacher nearly as often. Because before, I had meltdowns when I thought I might get hungry, right? Now I know there's a plan. So it will be actual, organic, authentic hunger that asks for the opportunity to go down the hall, okay? Think about one more of these with me. Think about, for example, sleep issues. So what could it be about the body? Well, many children that we have served over time who have low levels of the calming brain chemicals will do beautifully under a weighted blanket, 10 to 15% of their body weight. Weighted items, in the same way when you held your newborn tightly when they cried, in the same way that calmed your newborn, you didn't say to yourself, I perceive that I will activate the sensors beneath the surface of the skin, and those will do the electrical channels to the brain, and there'll be the release of serotonin and GABA. You know, nobody needed to say that to you. You just knew this baby calmed when you held them and snuggled them, right? And in the same way, when I put a weighted item on a child who maybe has fear issues, low serotonin, that is going to release serotonin and GABA, and that child will calm and sleep well for the first time for many of the children. If the child has low blood sugar, another body thing could be that we would empower. I'm going to give that child maybe a half of a turkey sandwich at bedtime. So they're going to eat a half turkey sandwich, it'll stabilize their blood sugar, because the protein will hold them longer. So I'm going to think about those things. I'm going to actually think about hydration. If you look at your own urine, this is a highly scientific test, your urine should be clear and odorless. That means that you're hydrated. Okay? If your child's urine has odor and color, or if yours does, you're not going to sleep well because toxins are flooding through your body in the night, and that will keep you from sound sleep. So hydrating during the day. So those are a few things. These are not exhaustive, these are just examples. And then connecting issues. We have parents of 12-year-olds who go and buy a baby monitor. We have to prove to this child they have a voice with us. Maybe that means more bedtime ritual, maybe that means more reading a story, maybe that means more time during the day when I just look into that child's eye, make sure he knows I am here for you. But if all else fails, we buy a baby monitor. And we have the daddy bear and the child go down to the bedroom. And the mama bear in the child's bedroom says, "Hey, come here, I need help." And everybody races up the stairs. And the child has seen, "Hey, they heard me," right? And then we flip-flop, and a parent and the child make the call, right? And this child can see, I have voice, I have safe caregiver who responds to voice, right? I am proving that I am connected. I was speaking in another state some time ago, and an individual said to me, you know, I heard something great about sleep problems. I heard it on TV, on the radio. Sorry, I heard it on the radio. And what they said was, if your child won't go to bed, get them to stand on a chair in a dark room for an hour and a half or two, and then when they beg to go to bed, you let them go to bed. So what happened to understanding the need, right? If our children can't sleep, is it a physical thing? Is it a connecting thing? Do they need to know they have a voice? I will tell you there's no more powerful message to a scared child or a child who's been previously harmed than to go to either the mall or a resale shop and say, I want to let you choose a bedroll, and it's going to stay by my side of the bed. And anytime you're scared, if you guide at the resale shop, I mean, you don't have to be wealthy to do these things, right? The resale shop has lots of cool options lots of times. Make sure you show the child you've washed it and freshened it, right? But show that child anytime you're scared, you come and you say, I'm scared, and they can crawl in bed and snuggle with you for 10 or 15 minutes, and then you can sleep in that bedroll and I'll hold your hand till you doze off, okay? I am saying you have a voice with me. I am on duty, right? Now, you don't tell them that they can't stay in your bed more than 10 minutes because it's like sleeping with a rotisserie turned on, right? But you could give them a plan. You can give them a plan, okay? So if I look at body issues, there are plenty of body issues that contribute to poor sleep. There are plenty of connecting issues, the spirit about, am I connected to you? Am I safe? That contribute to sleep. And then correcting. Maybe this child had predation in the night. Many, many children are harmed in the night. Nights were not safe. So the belief is, I am not safe, and I'm going to work on correcting not the behavior. It's not a problem that a child can't sleep. I'm going to address the belief that drives the behavior. And so when that child is talking about not being able to sleep, I'm going to say, you know what, darling, I know that nobody was able to protect you before you came home to me, but I give you my word, I'm on duty here. Do you want to help me lock the doors every night? Do you want to be the one that actually turns the lock? Do you want to be the one that helps me set the alarm every night? Do you want to go in my room and see your bedroll is still there waiting for you? In all of these ways, we meet the needs of body, soul, and spirit. We empower, we connect, and we correct. And we bring about dramatic healing. Some years ago, I had a friend, an acquaintance, I'll call him, who I worked with, and he does a lot of cognitive behavior work with kids. And so he was telling parents how to stop their children. He was actually talking to international parents, internationally adopted children's families. And he said, so if your child is rocking, they rock, you know, it's a maladaptive behavior, so you want to stop it, right? So if you sit down next to your child that's rocking and you start rocking the opposite direction, they will look at you and they'll be disconnected, disorganized. The comfort will be gone and they'll stop rocking. What about why he rocked, right? If I'm thinking about behaviors as what's the cause, right? He needed comfort. And I would say to a parent who wanted to do trust-based relationship with a child, who wanted to do what we call trust-based caregiving, sit down beside that child and rock. Let them know you share their suffering, you share their fear, you share their pain, and you're there to be comfort. Let them know that they're safe with you. Let them know that you're present. Buy a glider, put it on the porch. Buy a porch swing. Sit on the backyard children's swing. Swing with them, right? We have profound impact when we work with children in changing behaviors and long-term outcomes, because it's not the behavior that is our goal. It is the deep healing that is our goal. Trust-based relational intervention is about understanding where a child has come from and about bringing to bear all that we know about what they need, teaching them how to understand what they think, feel, need, want, teaching them to understand how to find safe people, teaching them to know that they can use their voice and that safe others will hear them. This is the essence of trust-based caregiving. Thank you guys so much.